heard the saying, don't judge a book by its cover. Never judge a leader by their speeches. Opposition head and your prime minister are fundamentally friendless people. Rahul has friends. He thinks he has friends, but is really a yes man coterie a friend? See, I would classify them as sheep, not as friend. I think Narasimha Rao is the greatest prime minister India has ever had, period. And he created the middle class. The middle class started growing wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. This is one very important thing about Modi. He is uniformly warm to everyone irrespective of race, religion, color, whatever. That is why I said he's not just an ordinary diplomatic prime minister, he's a great diplomatic prime minister. Look, you have to fear a Russia crumbling, because every time Russia crumbles, it comes back much more powerful. That is the first Russian identity we know, which was Slavs who got conquered by the Vikings and created the modern Russian identity.
Hello, Abhijit Iyer-Mitra.
Namaste,
It is your third or fourth appearance publicly on my podcast. You are a much requested guest. Your wit and brilliance in fields extending beyond geopolitics and into food and other domains have been admired by all. You are known, your abbreviation is AIM, because you aim for your enemies' hearts and rip them apart with your incredible, often caustic wit. But I happen to know you privately as a dear friend, as a lover of all animals, as a lover of good food and good architecture. This is a conversation about neither of those things.
Okay.
Instead, this is a conversation about power. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because, unlike several armchair scholars, you actively work with anywhere from political pundits to politicians to academics to policymakers. So not only do you understand the academics of power, you also understand how it plays out in the real world. So before I start that, I'm going to paraphrase something from Robert Greene. Power games exist around us. Turning a blind eye to them does not make them go away. People all around you are constantly finding ways to grow their power and diminish other people's power. Every minute, an old king falls and a new rebel rises. As long as societies exist, there will be victors and victims. So it is best to learn how power operates so you can use it to your advantage. And be particularly wary of those who say they are not interested in power. They are the most dangerous players in this game. So I'm going to use this as context to ask you what comes next. Why is it that some people become so good at acquiring and growing power? This could be political power or financial power. Is it fearlessness? Is it a lack of ethics? Is it the kind of environment that they grew up in?
It's a mixture of a lot of things. The first and most important is human relations, right? Power is fundamentally a human equation. After that, it's knowledge of what you're doing, which doesn't necessarily translate to everything else. The financially powerful might be emotionally powerless. There's lots of people like that that I know, which we won't mention. There are lots of politically powerful people who are friendless. So power is a very complex permutation, combination of skill, talent, human management, and risk-taking.
When you say there are political people who are friendless, does one not need friends when they are in high places to ensure that their interests are protected?
No, because like they say, if you've got somebody by the balls, the hearts and minds will follow. A leader fundamentally is somebody that you agree with. Their leadership is based on blind agreement. There is not a single leader in the world. Sure, about say 2 to 5% of the followership would be questioning, but the rest, 95 to 97 to 98%, would fundamentally be sheep.
And what does that do? Does that allow someone who is, let's just say, the prime minister of our country, would you say that in the games of power, is he a friendless man?
There's lots of people that you can say are friendless. Why just the Prime Minister? Even Rahul Gandhi is friendless.
Why would you say that?
Because I don't think his friends are actually telling him what he needs to hear. I know several of his friends who've tried telling him what he needs to hear, and he hasn't listened to them. At the prime ministerial level, yes, I do think the Prime Minister is friendless. He has lots of very, very admiring followers. Does he have friends that he can sit down and pour his heart out to? Tell me who's in that position. Has anyone even claimed to be in that position? With Indira Gandhi, we knew. Sometimes her children were her friend, or she had a very close coterie who we knew she could unwind with. Atal Bihari Vajpayee had a great set of friends. Many of them seen as traitors because they left the BJP after Atal Bihari Vajpayee, was past his prime. Manmohan Singh had lots of friends. Many of them not tolerated by the wife, but he had lots of friends. Rajiv Gandhi had lots of friends. He faced lots of personal betrayal for it. But today your opposition head and your Prime Minister are fundamentally friendless people. I mean, Rahul has friends. He thinks he has friends, but is really a yes-man coterie a friend? See, I would classify them as sheep, not as friend. You think that because you're socially compatible, I won't call them social equals, but socially compatible, you think they're your friends. But if somebody's just telling you what you need to hear, are they your friends? What you want to hear, are they your friends?
And so that begs the question, world leaders, is friendlessness or constant paranoia or being betrayed, is that the price for wearing the crown?
I think in India, we've reached a stage where we're at the extreme of friendlessness, both in the national leader and the so-called leader of the national opposition. But the extremes are usually, the friendlessness extreme is usually just that, it's an extreme. Usually you'll come across people who are multifaceted with a wide variety of friends. This sort of being lonely in your tower kind of thing is a very rare phenomenon. Yeah.
But in the game of power, let's say someone goes out and acquires power, right? And then someone loses power. We've seen that. I grew up in a Congress era where Congress was at the top. Now it's the BJP. And I'm sure because you grew up across the world, you saw other countries as well. I believe you lived in Vienna for a while, and Australia. You must have seen the rise and fall of several great giants, right? Like tons of them. And this could be on the institutional level, on the governmental level. What did you notice about, say, the hallowed halls of the parliament or other places, other governmental buildings, where the power seekers had some common traits? Like, I'm sure even now we can spot social climbers from a mile away, but they're not always successful in gaining power.
So, this has been one of the most impossible things to predict. One of the courses that was offered in my master's semester was leadership. Identifying them, nurturing them, whatever. I left that in about 2 weeks and switched to another subject because it was just such airy-fairy bullshit. You can't identify a leader when they're young. If anybody tells you that, they're basically bullshitting. Okay? The most important thing you may have all the qualities of a leader, but you ultimately succeed sometimes through sheer dumb luck. Just sheer dumb luck and nothing else.
Can we say Joe Biden falls in that? When he was the vice president, I never for the life of me could see him beyond the camaraderie brother kind of, duo with Obama wearing sunglasses. That's all I saw of him.
So his great luck was that Trump preceded him and that Trump won the election. Because remember, nobody, not even Fox News, gave Trump that 2016 election. So Trump winning and him having the least amount of negatives was the best thing that happened to Joe Biden. Joe Biden having the least number of negatives was the best thing that happened to Joe Biden. That he didn't piss off anybody. But let me give you the counterpoint to it. Narendra Modi pissed off a lot of people, and yet he's prime minister. So where's the commonality? One guy who pisses off nobody, another guy who pisses off a lot of people, they still become prime minister, right? You can take totally affable guys like, say, believe it or not, Mussolini, who was a very affable guy. You know, he was a journalist. And he could speak 4 or 5 languages. He used to speak...
Really?
Yeah. He was a journalist. Did you not know that? He was a left-wing journalist. Mussolini was a left-wing journalist. Very affable guy. Used to be very friendly with people around him and things like that. Became a dictator. And on the other, you had a complete paranoid nut job like Stalin also become a dictator. Both left-wing, mind you. You've had you've had borderline semi-literate people. And, you know, this is the clearest example of this is Spain and Portugal. You know, they both became dictatorships at around the same time. In Spain, it was General Franco. And the thing about Francisco Franco was that he was, you could say semi-literate, kind of semi-literate-ish, not particularly well educated. But he took Spain from being one of the poorest countries in Europe to having the 10th highest per capita income, 10th highest GDP in the world at that point.
Is this in the 14th, 15th century with the conquistadors?
No, it's in the 20th century.
Okay.
No conquest, no gold coming from anywhere else. This is 20th century history. And on the other hand, at the same time, 1960s, no, before that, before the 40s, you have, what's his name? Salazar become the dictator of Portugal, not through a military coup. He was professor of economics at the University of Coimbra. And in fact, it was his successor to the same chair who became the EU's ambassador to India for a while, which was, we used to keep teasing him about it, but anyway. And he did not improve, even though he's a professor of economics, he did not improve Portugal's standing one damn bit. So imagine a semi-literate guy takes Spain into an economic superpower. A professor of economics destroys the Portuguese economy.
Is that simplistically, can one say that when it comes to power and securing your leadership, what matters is filling the coffers of your followers than actually implementing public policy?
It can be done through many ways. It can be done through impoverishing your followers. It can be done through it can be done through impoverishing the country. It can't be done through impoverishing your followers, but if your followers are the country and you impoverish both of them, it's fine.
Yeah.
It can be done by empowering or enriching your followers, or it can be done by enriching without empowering the rest of the country, or it can be done by both empowering and enriching the country.
Okay.
So again, there is no set thing for this. So let me give you examples of everything. Hugo Chavez took one of South America's best economies and destroyed it overnight, and people kept voting for him.
And who is this person, Hugo Chavez?
He's the wanker who ran Venezuela.
Okay, yes.
And he came down to JNU and they were all like Lal Salam comrade and all that shit. Typical JNU trash. I know you like to hang out at JNU, but only trash hang out at JNU. Remember that. Not that I'm calling you trash, but I seriously doubt the company you hang out with. Anyway.
Kya ho gaya, Abhijit, bro? I
I
like to keep friends on both sides of the spectrum.
I think you might like to go to the doctor and have your nose checked up as well, because I can get the stench of body odor from a mile away. It smells like that. You know, there's that garbage dump in Okhla. So every time you ask my driver, Sachin, I'm like, every time I'm going to Vasant Vihar or Vasant Kunj, the moment we're going past JNU, I've shouted at him several times saying, "Arey ye kya Okhla le aaye ho? Maine JNU ke paas bola tha na." And then I realized, oh my God, it's JNU, because the Okhla garbage dump and JNU smell the same. You get the stench from so far away.
So, but what's the problem with JNU? Let's just use that as a premise for our discussion. Is that also a place where wrong notions of power are acquired? Because I went to a concert there once, and they had the Democratic Students Federation, and I saw the pictures of all the icons that they celebrated.
So,
and
JNU used to be very good in the 80s.
Okay.
Even though it was leftist. See, leftist, you don't have to be a bad leftist. Indian leftists are trashy leftists, because they're all theory, they don't know anything in practice.
Sure, you would say that as a member of the right.
No, because look, there were some profound truths in what Karl Marx wrote. The problem becomes confusing cause and effect. The problem becomes confusing path and destination. The problem becomes cut and paste of theory without understanding its applicability. Indian leftists have never been able to apply things on the ground. They'll constantly keep talking about the Kerala model. Well, Bengal was under the same communist party. Why don't you talk about the Bengal model? See, Kerala became the Kerala model because of the Malayalis, not because of communism.
What is it about them that made that successful?
Well, because everything at home was destroyed and they could travel abroad and repatriate money from the Gulf, as they call it. Okay. What did the Bengalis do? They didn't migrate to abroad. They all migrated to Delhi and destroyed Delhi after that. Delhi or other parts of wherever. But that's where they destroyed stuff, right? But let's get back to Hugo Chavez because we were talking about the leaders.
And on cue, that's our coffee. Cappuccino kaun si hai? Okay, we'll have to open and check here.
नहीं, एक में दूध है, एक में दूध नहीं है. It's that simple.
You know, we'll have to actually.
Oh my
Bro, I think this is yours.
पक्का?
ये दूध वाली है?
हाँ, वो होगा मेरा decaffeinated soy milk deaspartated aspartame latte.
इसके चीनी भी नहीं आई है?
नहीं, मेरे को चीनी फीनी नहीं चाहिए. मैं
सारा तामझाम दे दो स्टर के साथ. लो ब्रो.
Thank you.
Yeah,
नहीं चाहिए. Thank you.
This is the. You don't want a stirrer either.
नहीं.
Oh, okay. You stir enough pots.
नहीं भाई, मेरे को नहीं चाहिए ढक्कन.
Okay.
अरे मेरे को नहीं चाहिए. थैंक यू. तेरे को चाहिए तो मैं इसको पास कर देता हूँ. ये ले.
मैं क्या करूँगा इसको?
मेरे को क्या पता. तेरे को चीनी फीनी चाहिए तो ले ले.
नहीं, किसी को इसको बत्ती बना के कहीं. Thank you. Sorry. Anyway, yeah. Let them just clear out.
So Hugo Chavez took a relatively wealthy country, destroyed it, people voted for him. His successor destroyed it even more and people voted for him. Okay. On the other hand, you take somebody like Lee Kuan Yew. Remember, it's the Socialist Republic of Singapore. People don't realize that Singapore is fundamentally a socialist country. The houses, there are very few private houses there. There are housing boards. There was guaranteed minimum education, guaranteed housing, guaranteed employment, etc.
If it's a socialist regime, why is it so successful? Why is it called a paragon of success?
What they did was that they ensured human... So this is the thing. They did the smart thing, which is understand what socialism was and apply it smartly. Which is what? You invest in human beings, but you don't invest in failure. You learn from failure and you change it.
It's iterative.
Exactly. With Hugo Chavez, it was... I'm going to implement ideology because it concentrates power in my hands. It's wildly powerful. And then what happens when the money runs out? So see, there is socialism and then there is socialism. There is socialism which is investing in human beings, which I don't believe is truly socialism, even though Lee Kuan Yew kind of masqueraded it around as socialism. Because remember, you were dealing with very strong communist movements in those days. There was the Malaya Revolt, there was Sukarno in Indonesia and all of that crap happening. So Lee Kuan Yew had to tread a very careful line out there because he never knew when the next communist revolution was coming. He arrested, shot, tortured all the communists. Nobody wants to talk about that aspect of Lee Kuan Yew, but people used to disappear in Singapore in those days. And they used to end up, most of them never ended up anywhere. Nobody found them.
Yeah.
But some of them who were had horrible torture marks on them and things like that.
I think that part of the world just does not get enough coverage.
It does not.
Or if it does, from a very layman standpoint for Indians.
Even though Singapore has the highest per capita income based on human capital alone.
Yeah.
It is not based on, say, stashed away black money like Liechtenstein or Luxembourg. It is not based on the discovery of natural resources like Norway. Norway, incidentally, when they wanted to separate from Sweden, the Swedes said, please go. We don't want you. You're such backward country bumpkins. We don't want you as part of our country. You're the dehatis that we need to get out of our country. Do you know how many people died in the Norwegian independence movement?
I have no idea.
Somewhere between 5 and 7 people.
That's so boring.
Yeah. That's their independence movement.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so you have bad socialism. Then you have people like, say, Margaret Thatcher, who turned around the fortunes of Britain completely. Britain was rapidly...
For the better, right? Because
for the better.
she was the first conservative female prime minister who actually
But the
is
first
known.
conservative who had not just female.
Yeah.
She was the first... Let's ignore the woman part, because I think,
Sure.
people think that she should be given credit for being the woman. No. She was probably the greatest prime minister Britain had, irrespective of gender, because she's the one that had the guts to call out the trade unions, shut down the coal mines, shut down all of that crap that wasn't producing money, and focus the entire country on producing money. She's the one that decided, look, we can't just keep going after manufacturing time and time again when, our labor is so expensive, we can't sustain this kind of manufacturing. So let's go after financial services. Right? So there were lots of things that she did as a prime minister, period. Her gender is totally, irrelevant to the entire topic. Just like for me, Indira Gandhi was, I have huge issues with her economic policy, with her social policy. But in terms of her security policy, she was more man than any man. And I think her gender was entirely irrelevant to it. I think she was the best security prime minister for India, not necessarily the best economic prime minister for India.
And is it difficult to compare prime ministers from decades ago to prime ministers of now, because contexts, industries and everything's changed? Like, could you actually compare an Indira Gandhi to a Narendra Modi and say that, if you were to rank them, where would they both place?
I don't think when you're this close in terms of time, just about 30, 40 years separate their prime ministerships, I think they can be compared. Indira Gandhi just didn't have the guts to do economic reforms.
And Modi does?
He does. More so in his in the beginning of his very, very first term, till that when the opposition was paralyzed, till Rahul Gandhi coined that term "suit boot ki sarkar" and put them on the back foot. And I think they're slowly getting that courage back. But I don't think Modi is a very good security prime minister. Modi is a very good foreign policy prime minister. He doesn't rub people the wrong way. Indira Gandhi and Nehru before her had a great propensity to rub people the wrong way unnecessarily. Modi does not rub people the wrong way. He's a very good foreign policy prime minister. He's a very good interpersonal relationship prime minister. He's a very good salesman of India.
Just before I
sadly,
came here,
he's not a good security prime minister, and he's for me a sort of mediocre economic prime minister. He might become a good economic prime minister.
just before I came here, I saw a picture of Modi, Putin and Xi Jinping, which would be, I'm sure, a treat for all the geopolitics fanboys, because you would assume that this trifecta of people are going to actually, put up a fight against the Americas of the world. And I saw the SEO summit. It does seem to me that even if you were to have a body language expert coming in and analyze the very visibly fabricated handshakes that world leaders do when they meet the first time, Modi always seems to have a very cordial kind of handshake, always has the upper hand, always is polite and endearing, as opposed to Donald Trump's, pulling in handshake, or Putin's animalistic.
So, the thing is, this is one very important thing about Modi. He is uniformly warm to everyone, irrespective of race, religion, color, whatever. Notice he's just not huggy-duggy only with superpower presidents and prime minister. He's huggy-duggy with everyone, including the Papua New Guinea prime minister who touched his feet when he came. He's just completely, "Arey tu mera bhai hai" ki tarah, whatever. And he's that same kind of informal, endearing, no airs about him when he's meeting a prime minister. Doesn't matter how small or big that prime minister is. ठीक है ना? Which is the way you should be. that is why I said he's not just an ordinary diplomatic prime minister, he's a great diplomatic prime minister. There's still the thing about the reform of the foreign service and things like that, which he hasn't done. That's a different matter. But in terms of being a diplomat himself, he's a fantastic diplomat.
Do you think that is the key to his power? I mean,
no,
internally, domestically?
I don't. I think it's a bonus, but I don't think that's the key to his power. It might have been, it could have been, because I haven't studied these things about him when he was chief minister and things like that. Maybe he was just as warm and enthusiastic with everybody around him, but now he's aloof from all of them. Because he is aloof from the rest of the people. So it might have been, but it wouldn't have been the only thing. But look, one thing I know, the only trait I know common to any global leader is narcissism. You cannot be a leader without a certain amount of narcissism. There is no such thing as the unassuming leader. You know, this notion that power was cast into my hand, I did not want it. Do you know the fraud who started all of this?
Who?
Augustus.
Okay. The Emperor Augustus of Rome.
Emperor Augustus of Rome, who Julius Caesar chose to succeed him. He realized, because, you know, Caesar wanted to be king of Rome. But the Romans hated kings because they had gotten rid of the Etruscan, the 7 kings of Etruria who had ruled over them.
And they had some kind of a senate, right?
And they had a senate. And it was it was fiercely republican, and they couldn't tolerate a king. So what happens is he orchestrated for the Senate to offer him the kingship. And, you know, he went on saying, no, I can't accept it. I can't accept it. I can't accept it. And everybody around there, and this is why, you know, the people who killed him were celebrated as heroes, because they understood that he very much did want it. And when he came back, it would be super dangerous. So this is, you know, we've spoken about this, haven't we? In Iran, there is this thing of taruf.
No, we haven't.
So in Iran, taruf out there. It's when, you know, I want to insult Vinamra Kasana. In your typical Gujar dialogue, you would say MCBC, whatever, etc., etc. Persia is very civilized. They'll never do that. They'll say, Vinamra, there is no podcaster greater than you. When you speak, it is like the koyal ki kook or bulbul ki ter. It is like the singing of Lata Mangeshkar.
Yeah.
It is like the rising of the birds chirping to the rising of the morning sun.
You got to blame Rumi for that.
And all this time I'm being sarcastic. There's another version of Taruf, which is this whole thing when you try to pay somebody in Iran, they won't take it. They'll say, no, please don't pay me, please don't pay me, please don't. And it's a whole negotiated process. And I've actually lost my temper and just slammed it down on the table and walked off. Because if you actually walk off, they'll call the police on you. So they do want to get paid. And, you know, I don't have time for all this tamasha. Like, if I have to say something about Vinamra, I'll just say it to your face, Vinamra MCBC. Okay? I'm not going to do, the chirping of the bulbul.
The directness is frowned upon.
Nonsense.
So that's why they use these dilly-dally ways to get what they want, right?
Exactly. So, you know, this is what Caesar did. And Augustus was very, 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 very smart about it. He knew this is why Caesar had been killed, but that Caesar had been too transparent in his desire. And so Augustus, who was an absolutely depraved, sexually depraved, morally depraved, rotten character, created this aura about an Augustus who was morally incorruptible, who was intellectually uncorruptible, who was not after power. He killed off the triumvirate of Mark Antony and the other guy, who was it, Lepidus? I forget now, the second triumvirate. He killed them off for the sake of Rome, not for personal glory. And he didn't want to become king, so he nominated himself as princeps or imperator. So, you know, that is where the word emperor comes from. As an alternate, but higher than the king, see?
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
Instead of calling yourself prime minister, you can call yourself the protector of the nation.
Right.
You can use these labels to bypass what is.
So that's what General Francisco Franco did in Spain. He didn't call himself the Prime Minister or the President of Spain. He called himself the caudillo of Spain, the great leader of Spain. Right? So notice even the word, because in English we just translate it to emperor. But in each culture, it has a different actual word. Right? So for example, in Roman, it was imperator in Latin. In Persia, it was Shahinshah, the king of kings. But see, the word king is there, but I am the king of kings, right? In post-Roman Britain, it was what the Rex something. Rex is king, but it was the high king. In India, it was the Chakravarti Samrat. The Chakravarti being the holder of the dharma, and Chakra has a whole this thing. So in each country, you've always had these titles which surpass the king, but you use it very carefully, and it's always been a political invention.
That's very interesting. Even in the mafia families, there's the Don, and then there's the Godfather.
Look, that's only in bloody The Godfather, right?
No.
In real life, the head of the 'Ndrangheta or the Cosa Nostra went called the Don, and the Don Superiore and Don Inferiore and things like that.
Dude, I don't know geopolitics analogies. I'm just trying to understand this.
Okay.
But other leaders, are there other examples of leaders that strike out to you who have always played to their courtiers and their public as kind, guileless, not evil, morally incorruptible, full of ethics, but done the exact opposite the moment they gain power?
I think there have been several like that. Much more so now than before. I think the classic case was Obama. Who everybody sort of...
Even I was hopeful watching that speech early morning outside as a kid, man.
Have you heard the saying, don't judge a book by its cover? Never judge a leader by their speeches.
Okay. I mean, I was a kid. I did not know you were at that point.
So these great Democrat icons, Kennedy and Obama, rotten and corrupt to the core, to the absolute core of their existence.
Even Obama, I mean, he puts out Spotify playlists to show that he's cool.
Yeah, dude. Like I said, don't judge him by his speech, and you're judging him by his Spotify playlist.
What should I judge him on? By his policies? I mean,
so Hitler was very loving to his dog. Could you believe that somebody very loving to his dog could gas off 6 million Jews?
I can. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
So just because a guy has a Spotify playlist doesn't make him,
But he was so winsome and so charismatic and so charming, and he did all the right things. And
No, he did not do the right things. He did a lot of horrible, nasty things.
Public appearances wise.
No, he had a press that was ready to fillet him, and यही लोग हिंदुस्तान में आके गोदी मीडिया बोलते हैं. I have never seen a more there is more integrity to be found between the legs of a whore on GB Road than there is in the Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal editorial boards or the CNN's editorial board. I honestly tell you this. Leave GB Road alone. Every sex worker, understand, a sex worker is there because he or she either enjoys it or they're forced into doing it and they have no option. Either they're trafficked into it or they're desperate for money. That I respect. What these guys do, I mean, you saw what happened with Hunter Biden's laptop. Everybody wanted to talk it down, pretend it wasn't. We now know that Hunter Biden's a pedophile. Yeah. He's taken bribes. He's influenced his father to take certain decisions in lieu of money. All of this is proven beyond a doubt because of Hunter Biden's own laptop and his own WhatsApp exchanges and things like that.
I saw a picture of him with an underage girl on Twitter that was circulating.
He's still not even being touched, prosecuted. The AG of the United States is being impeached at the moment because he asked people to go slow. You had a whole bunch of people who knew the Russia dossier on Trump was false and they went on propagating it. So if you want to see what an institutional corruption looks like, look no further than America. America is further down the road of institutional decay than India has ever been. Even during the emergency, we at least had one or two judges in the Supreme Court that had the guts to stand up.
Would you not say that the current government has completely crushed the opposition, completely taken over all the institutions and used the CBI and the ED and all these organizations as their own watchdogs?
So, first of all, the opposition is responsible for crushing themselves. If you can't win elections, it's your own goddamn fault. Number two, on institutions, what is a takeover of CBI and ED? Because the CBI and ED, you were never appointed CBI, CID, ED or anything head unless you were filleting the powers that be. You only get there because you are a brown noser. Okay. What this government did was it expanded the ED manifold. Why? Because it felt there was lots of money getting through the cracks. The harassment level of ED or the CBI has neither gone up nor down. It's just that because the numbers have expanded significantly, you feel the pinch more. Who weaponized all of these? It was done during the Congress era. Na? It's not like the ED didn't exist. It was just a small thing that was used selectively. Now it's a big thing that has freedom to do whatever the hell it wants. How is that institutional capture? How many court judgments keep going against the government? तो उधर का क्या court capture है? How is winning an election institutional capture?
What is it about the BJP and this government and the previous government, that is Congress, that we see that the BJP continues to grow in power tremendously at absurd rates, and the Congress keeps capturing a few states here and there now after almost 10 years of BJP decimating them? What has the old guard, or like just say like, I would call Congress the old money of power and BJP new money. That's the way I would describe it. What has the old money Congress done wrong in letting power go? And what has BJP, new money BJP, done right in accumulating so much power? I mean, let's go back to the central theme of power.
Okay. And you know the sign of the yin and the yang, na? You can put up a visual while we're talking.
Masculine, feminine, yeah.
No. What is the most important thing in the yin and the yang? According to you?
The balance. I would say that in the yin and the yang, even in the yang, there's a little dot of yin, and in the yang, there's a little dot of... in the yin, there's a little dot of yang.
So the white dot and the black, and the black dot, because the origin of one lies in the other. The origin of the BJP's power today, lies in the economic reforms of Narasimha Rao. He created the middle class in India. Okay, single-handedly, that man. I think Narasimha Rao is the greatest prime minister India has ever had, period. And he created the middle class. The middle class started growing wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. And remember, once, I'm still working on this because the data is so difficult to collect and it's so varied. But generally, under about... let's say about $2,000, the numbers are very difficult. They keep changing from country to country. Under about $2,000 per capita, you tend to be very subsistence minded. At about $2,000, you start getting very nationalistic. Your subsistence needs are met, then you focus on your identity needs. $2,000 to $5,000 is where you're getting nationalistic. $5,000 to about $15,000 is where you're getting ultra-nationalistic. That's the danger zone. Over $15,000 is where you're starting to get liberal, and over, say, about $25,000, $30,000 is when you start getting woke.
Is that like a graph? Is this a study? Like, what is this?
I'm still collecting the data. See, the problem is, you can say these are GDP figures from, or per capita GDP figures from everywhere. The problem is, what did they account for in their per capita GDP?
Right.
Because each country has a different system of national income accounting. Different people have. So it's naam ke vaste, it's very easy to see that. Then how do you account for nationalism? What do you define as nationalism in a country? Where do you see the beginning of nationalism? So, for example, in France and Britain, where the idea of a nation grew after the 100 Years' War in the 1400s, in India, the concept of an India always existed. But was Shivaji an Indian nationalist? See, it's very difficult to define that, right?
One would say he was more a beacon of Marathi statism.
No, he was more than Marathi. He was definitely, there was definitely a national Indian consciousness in him. There was definitely a Hindu consciousness in him. But was it the kernel of Indian nationalism as we know it today? So, even defining nationalism becomes very tough. So, I've been trying to, so right now I'm at the stage of shortening down the time period to just look at the emergence of modern nationalism in countries. But anyway, going back to the subject, what happens is you had this period where a huge middle class got created. There was a huge amount of wealth generation. There was a huge amount of self-confidence. And self-confidence doesn't want a message of subsistence. You can't go to a guy who's looking at options between undino mein, this is way before you were born, after the ambassador sort of went out of vogue. In undino mein, we only had ambassador and Fiat. When that went out of vogue, it was the Maruti 1000 that came out.
What?
Yeah, it was.
I've never heard of this. I've only heard of the 800.
Yeah, so it was the Maruti 1000. So it was the Maruti 800 and then it was the Maruti 1000. Everybody's going, oh my God, the Maruti 1000. And then there was a Rover that came into the market that was all big thing.
From Land Rover, the company that the...
No, Rover, the British company, but not Land Rover. This was a different
separate
car.
company.
It came, it went, nobody noticed it in the Indian market and things like that. Anyway. So what ended up happening was, sorry, किस context में बात कर?
So we were talking about what has the BJP done?
Yes. So in those days, a guy who was looking at buy a Maruti 1000, you go tell him roti kapda makan, and he's gonna slap you like if you're a Gujar like you, he'll slap you and say MCBC. Now, if you go tell a guy like that roti kapda makan, how is he going to react? See, this was and then there was the generational change, where we fought for independence. By today, all of India was born well after independence. They don't remember the British. This is not a story that tomorrow, if some guy, say with the name Vinamra Maurya, comes and decides to become chief minister, okay, and says, भाइयों आपको पता नहीं है, मेरे पूर्वज चंद्रगुप्त मौर्य ने अलेक्जेंडर से तुमको आजादी दिलाई थी. He won't get bloody 5 votes today.
Yep. We're too past independence to really have that as a central issue in the back of our heads.
Now, what did the Congress have to offer other than roti kapda makan? This sort of subsistence narrative and the legacy of independence. Nothing. They didn't reinvent themselves. Their legitimacy was from independence. Their promise was subsistence. Now, they all blamed India Shining, which was a message of hope, for the 2004 defeat of Vajpayee. We all know that's not true. In 2004, Vajpayee lost the election because the RSS refused to come out and campaign for him.
Why is that?
A whole variety of reasons. He wasn't getting along with the leadership and things like that. Very complicated reasons. I mean, you'll have to do a whole podcast with a proper BJP historian for that. But what happens is wrong messaging, wrong time, wrong people. And Manmohan Singh was quite a successful prime minister. So you see a significant increase in the middle class even during his reign. Where essentially you've created the reasons for your own downfall. You remember how I told you Hugo Chavez succeeded by keeping everybody poor? That's in many ways what Nehru and Indira Gandhi did. Whereas Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh grew up a whole generation. And, gratitude's a very heavy burden to carry. Nobody wants to thank Narasimha Rao for where they are today. Everybody wants to spit on Manmohan Singh, saying Mohan Singh and all kinds of nonsense like that. Remember, those two guys put us where we are today. Okay? Which people will not acknowledge, of course, but it's the truth. So you created a thing where your sales pitch no longer worked with this aspirational class. And then the Congress took a particularly dangerous turn under Rahul Gandhi of turning ultra-socialist and ultra-woke.
So what does that mean?
Because I think losing his father early with Rahul meant that the mother had to do the raising up. She did not raise an Indian leftist. She raised a European social democrat whose terms of reference and whose upbringing was very much a European social democrat. His
What's an Indian leftist?
an Indian leftist would still be talking a lot about roti kapda makan. He would be opposing, he would be supporting organized labor as opposed to unorganized labor. His only focus on unorganized labor was to see to it how to organize it in order to weaponize it for himself. Rahul doesn't get all of this, you see, because he's now the sort of armchair leftists that have become rich and they're disconnected from the ground. So this was Rahul's problem. He turned too far left for his own good. I think the corruption could have been overcome. You know, the dhapa of corruption in UPA 2, which actually all happened in UPA 1. I think that could have been overcome. But a leftist turn in a country that's become rich and turned nationalistic, a subsistence sales pitch in a country that wants to be aspirational and not desperational. You are essentially, what he is doing is if Marie Antoinette said, let them eat cake to the peasants, he's the type who's going to the Versailles and selling grass bread.
It's not going to work out.
It's not going to work.
Because they're the aristocracy.
Exactly. You're misreading your audience badly. And you know, it's very easy for you to claim that you're losing because of institutional capture instead of admitting that the failure is within you. So I want you to see how the BJP has gone so far, right? Before, say, this was the center. Okay, the mic is the center. Okay. This is right. This is generally where the BJP used to be. And this kind of left of center is where the Congress used to be. Okay? What you saw happen in Rahul Gandhi was the Congress went here.
Further left.
The BJP, after winning, moved here.
So the BJP is also center-left now?
Now, yeah. Economically, they're
so what about the labeling of BJP as right-wing Hindutva all the time that I see? Is that a mislabeling?
No, from what angle are they right-wing exactly?
But that's the word.
I know the word right-wing is applied.
Yeah.
But tell me what is right-wing about them.
One would, I don't know. I would argue
identity
like conservatism.
Politics everybody plays.
Okay.
Just because somebody plays an identity politics you don't like doesn't mean they get to be right.
So सब लोगों ने गलत label क्यों कर रहे हैं फिर? Like, और this is a very controversial issue.
First of all, I've never understood this right-wing, left-wing label in the Indian context. I am right-wing in the sense that I am economic right. The BJP is not economic right.
Okay. It's also socialistic.
They're as pro-privatization as, say, the Congress has ever been. The Congress also did lots of privatization. Why don't we talk about that? Okay. So, I disagree with that. So, now, the right-wing space is this much. The left-wing space is just this much.
So, the Congress is back in the corner.
So, they're back. They are today where the Communist Party was 10-15 years back at 65 to 65 seats. They are going to go where the CPIM are today, which is 5 to 10 seats. Okay, they are going to go there. And that is very problematic because this country needs an opposition. Now, what has Narendra Modi done to prevent? It is not institutional capture, to prevent a credible opposition from rising. What he does is he manages to balance out each opposition leader's loathing or fear for the other and regional differences from them ever being able to come together. They all stay reasonably powerful in their own state, which is, I think, this love for useless regional leaders who can't win elections on their own is very calibrated so that they don't feel threatened in their own backyard that they're forced to unite in the center to oppose him.
What would be an example of that? Where
you look at Karnataka. They put up Bommai, who is a nobody. He's totally non-charismatic. In Tamil Nadu, you now have an Annamalai who is charismatic, but before that, who did you have? And even Annamalai, let's see how it goes a bit further. You had Shivraj Chauhan, but he's lost several elections and he's been propped up in spite of losing elections.
Constantly.
Vasundhara Raje is not a threat for him because it's always going to be pendulum. She's going to win one election, lose one election, win one election, lose one election. Who was the guy in Chhattisgarh before Bhupesh Baghel? The Raman Singh. No threat at all, removed. With this one, with Mamata Banerjee, he sees to it there is no strong leader, one strong leader that comes up against her.
So
In
deliberately he
in
lets
Odisha,
her win.
He sees that there is no one strong leader that comes up against Biju Patnaik. Naveen Patnaik, sorry. Right? So it's a very carefully calibrated way of seeing I'm a threat to you, but I'm not really a threat to you. Number one. Number two, what he does is, which is very smart, is he realized what had happened in 2004, where it wasn't the Congress that defeated Vajpayee, it was the RSS that defeated Vajpayee. Till he became Prime Minister in 2014, the ratio of RSS to BJP was always 1:1, maximum 1.5:1.
1.5 being RSS.
BJP.
Okay.
Today, do you know what the ratio is?
Pretty low.
28:1. For every RSS worker, there are 28 BJP workers. The RSS cannot pull off a 2004 again.
So they've stolen the ideological power from the RSS.
Exactly. They are still treated with great respect, but they have no ability to influence an election anymore. Okay? So he's removed that from the RSS. He's removed, so they can't do a Vajpayee to him. He's removed the USP of the Congress. Anyway, the Congress messaging was growing irrelevant, but then at the wrong time, they got the wrong guy. I mean, if there was ever a anti-hero at a time of crisis, then Rahul Gandhi was it. He was literally born under cursed stars. I think every star was out of alignment the moment Rahul Gandhi was born. Poor chap. I mean, it's a very heavy burden to carry, but it is the burden he has to carry.
Damn. And do you think Modi's power is going to keep consolidating under his fold and Amit Shah's fold as time goes on? Will there be some kind of a secret coup?
First of all, I dispute that either Yogi or Amit Shah will be his successors.
You dispute this. This is because several...
He does not do strong successors. He does Champu successors. He only chose Champus to succeed him in Gujarat. No? He is not the kind who wants to see his legacy perpetuated by a man even more talented than him that he's groomed. He will probably see to it some kind of a Champu comes up after him.
A dummy prime minister.
A Champu. For all you know, he might be the one to make Rahul Gandhi Prime Minister. Why? Because it will make him look good by comparison.
You know, I actually saw him for the first time a few weeks ago at an event that the Ministry of Culture organized. I was invited, and I mean, I don't know. You've obviously seen and met several heads of state, and I think you've met a lot of them. I have never met a head of state. So he was बहुत दूर बैठे हुए थे सारे लोग जो थे, and बड़ा ऐसा we were sort of chaperoned into a hall, and I was like, okay, what is the experience of like seeing a prime minister? I was reading from a teleprompter, but even then I could notice everyone else's speeches made people like sleep. He was such a great orator, despite everything.
He's a fantastic orator. You don't sleep through his speeches.
Yeah.
I think he used to be a lot wittier when he was chief minister of... He's lost the wit. He's become very serious now. But you still don't sleep through his speeches.
Yeah.
Whereas mostly you sleep through people's speeches. But I don't think the speeches are what makes him leadership material. Like I said, it's so much to do with luck and alignment and things falling in place at the right time. And
why do people swear? Let's talk about power in the context of having people follow you and rally around your cause. Obviously, you said that India as an overall country was moving more toward, we want to get richer, we want to have better lives. Fuck subsistence, that's already gradually, anyway, the poor will get less poorer as time goes on, right? What is it about him that still continues to get hundreds and thousands and lakhs of people to follow him around and to, champion his message? Is it his charisma? Is it the fact that he is an everyman? Is it the fact that there is a Hindu renaissance that we're seeing now, and he seems to be at the head of that? Because in my lifetime, I'm 26 years old, I've never seen such passionate, cultish admiration for Modi, for any prime minister, that I've seen for him.
I've seen it while growing up. I've seen it both for Indira Gandhi and for Rajiv Gandhi.
Really?
And I've also seen the first turning of it when Rajiv Gandhi, 2 years into his prime ministership, started becoming deeply unpopular. I've also seen how the mood turns. The cult of Modi is nothing compared to what we were put through as kids in terms of hero worship of Nehru and Gandhi and Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi. There used to be a time when Doordarshan News was all about Rajiv Gandhi cutting ribbons everywhere. 90% of the news was Rajiv Gandhi cutting ribbons or going abroad or something like that or the other. Indira Gandhi, I remember I wasn't even in a government school. I was in a private school in Delhi while I was in Delhi in a place called DPS Mathura Road. Okay. Except for, so we had a music teacher called Mrs. Carvalho or Mrs. Carmelo, I forget what it was. So except for the school play, which used to be based on the life of Jesus. I don't know why Hindus are doing something on the life of Jesus, but she always, for us, the thing was always the nativity scene, and it was always about the birth of Christ, and we all had to dress up like the three magi or whatever, because I was in the elocution club and all of that, no? So we dress up as the three magi. I was one of the three magi always, for whatever reason. They never found me fit to be the baby Jesus, but and, I remember the one song we all had to sing, "We three kings of ta-ta-ta-ta, bearing gifts we travel afar, west leading, still proceeding, following down the star." So, and we're the three princes from abroad coming to give the baby Jesus gifts and whatever. Anyway, all the other plays had to do with independence, and it had to compulsorily feature Nehru, Gandhi or Indira Gandhi, preferably Indira Gandhi. The plays that we were taken to see, and it used to be fantastic when suddenly out of the class you'd be like, "Come, we're all going to see a play. Oh, yeah, no maths class, let's go." Was about Indira Gandhi. And, it was everything in our lives that we were socialized to was Gandhi this or Gandhi that or Gandhi this or Gandhi that. People have forgotten that. When I and even I had forgotten that till, when I realized this. This is why I love traveling to North Korea. Because North Korea reminded me of my childhood in Delhi in the 1980s.
Are you really saying that?
I'm serious, boss. From import substitution of not having cola or Fanta, we had Campa Cola and Gold Spot, which in my opinion were actually better than Coca-Cola and Fanta. We did not have Coke or Fanta or whatever, import substitution total. There were no cars on the streets. It used to be empty. I used to live in a place called Bharti Nagar opposite Khan Market. Khan Market, the first restaurant to come up there was a place called Chona's, which was like super exclusive. Oh my God, we're seen at Chona's. How exclusive. And it was like 20 rupees for something kind of thing in those days, which was like, oh my God, so exclusive. The most expensive thing I remember having was a chicken dosa at the Oberoi, which in those days was 50 rupees. I used to be like, oh my God, 50 rupees. And it was all, getting a tin of craft cheese. Aaj to main craft cheese chhoo bhi na ki itna low class cheese hai. These days you only want Gruyere and Camembert and Gorgonzola and Roquefort, or if you're particularly snobbish like me, you'll only go in for British Leicester blue, which is a very specific kind of a blue culture that comes in the cheese and things like that. But today even an ordinary person doesn't expect bloody craft cheese on the cheese board. They at least expect a parmesan and a brie. सबको brie का नाम पता है. सबको parmesan का तो नाम पता है.
सबको नहीं पता, अभिजीत.
Boss, a lot of people, the middle class, they certainly know their way around. True, a lot of them don't, but those are the people who hate anything other than paneer butter masala. Anybody who has even a rudimentary interest in Western food knows a bit more than pasta in pink sauce and pasta in white sauce.
I agree with that.
Okay. Now, it was like that. Every program we saw in North Korea had to do with Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un. It reminded me of my childhood here because every cultural program we went to had something to do with independence and the Gandhi family. How is it any different? Maybe it wasn't such absolute mind control and indoctrination. It was mild mind control and indoctrination, but it was mind control and indoctrination. It was a very concerted attempt at indoctrination. And if you talk to Anand Ranganathan, you will see the kind of ways in which the law was severely abused under the Gandhi family. Nehru himself abused the law so many times. We've forgotten all of that. There's been a very deliberate attempt to whitewash. You know, the only time in India's history that people were ethnically profiled and thrown in concentration camps. Do you know we've had concentration camps in India built for Indian Chinese that had no connection with China simply because they had ancestors who had come 100 years back from China, was done by Nehru. Ramchandra Guha, for all his greatness of history, never wants to write about it. He just explains it away as zeitgeist. Who did the only Hitlerian ethnic-based concentration camping in India complete with unnaturally high death rates? Jawaharlal Nehru. Why does nobody want to talk about that? No government since has ever done that. CA-NRC isn't a patch on that. CA-NRC is a register of citizens. It has nothing to do with ethnicity. It has to do with can you prove citizenship or not. It has to do with if you have a ration card, great. That is one of the proofs of citizenship. Documentation is proof.
And what about the persecution of Muslims across the country? That is the one blotch that the BJP does have, or like...
Does it? Does it? Because this government has spent more on Muslim education than any other government previously in India's history.
Maybe that's just for theatrics.
No. Education is investing in the human being. Education is the real investment. Because remember, when we're talking about Muslims, let's be very specific. Sunnis, the Shias in India, who are about 30% of the Indian Muslim population, have no problems with Modi at all. You look at the Boris and the Ismailis and all of that, they're all bloody voting for Modi. The Bori Sayyadna is on record every time before the election. He comes and demands his community vote for Modi. You saw those Muslims in Egypt just now who came to meet him everywhere in Egypt and in America and all those places. They're all Boris.
I understand that. But then there are also several news clippings where...
Now, there is the issue of cow lynching, and there is this notion that you have of increased communal tension. Let's talk about that. Cow lynching. First of all, where does this whole cow lynching thing begin? My colleague, Joyita Bhattacharya from ORF, she wrote a phenomenal paper on cow smuggling into Bangladesh. She died during COVID, but it was a fantastic paper that she did. What she noted was how the entire cow smuggling network was based on illegality because you had to keep bribing everybody.
Sure.
And it was a dhanda where you would steal cows. Now, understand, losing a cow for us, tomorrow if your car, even if your Merc gets crashed, sure, your dad will yell at you and things like that, but it's not life and death for you. For these guys, that cow is everything. It is the source of protein for their kids. It is the source of fat for their kids through milk and ghee. It is their source of fuel because of the grass it eats and processes and makes into this thing. It is the source of building material. It is the source of farm labor. In one fell swoop, you have taken away fuel, you have taken away protein, you have taken away nourishment, you have taken away labor. That one cow is so important, they're willing to kill over it. And yet a lot of this cow smuggling into Bangladesh was based on theft of cows. Okay, before what used to happen was they didn't dare retaliate because all the governmental systems for this cow smuggling were in cahoots with the cow smugglers. When the government changed, there was no longer a green light for the system to allow illegality. So people long suppressed angst that turned out. Did new networks of criminals trying to establish their pecking order rise up against the old order? Yes. But has it been green lighted by the BJP? No. So anybody who's talking about cow lynching is completely, I don't think they're clueless about the sociology of cow smuggling in this country. I think they're being deliberately mischievous about it because they're not telling you the complete sociological context of that cow smuggling. Okay, number one. Number two, remember, a lot of the cow smuggling that happened was also legitimate cow smuggling in that sense. Because, it's like prohibition. Everybody knows about the prohibition period in America and the kind of illegality. That's what produced Al Capone and people like that, right? But nobody wants to talk about it in India. Because the same reason nobody ever told us that Chacha Nehru built that complete white elephant called Bhakra Nangal Dam. Biggest piece of shit, waste of taxpayers' money ever used. Because in school, we were never taught about Bhakra Nangal Dam and all the ecological damage it caused. We were taught about the Aswan High Dam and what Nasser did, what Chacha Nasser did, but not what Chacha Nehru did. Because Nehru could do no wrong. Okay.
Sure.
Because, when Nehru farted also, it was like it used to smell of roses kind of thing. So, it's the truth.
No,
Now,
listen, about this cow lynching thing, I didn't say that at all. What I was saying is, there is clearly a persecution of Muslims in the country that hasn't happened before.
There is not. And this is what I'm trying to tell you. Now, this entire narrative, minus the sociological context, minus the socio-legal context, has been decontextualized to tell you that Muslims are being lynched, number one. Number two, let's come to the other stuff, which is the Hindu-Muslim riots that have been happening.
Yes.
I want you to go back and check all the rioting and deaths that have happened. They were peak during the Congress period. Just go back and check the statistics. They peaked during the Congress periods. There has never... Listen, we had partition in this country, boss. 10 million people were displaced. What, 2-3 million people died during partition? कौन सा भाईचारा था इस देश में? There has been a constant, huge Hindu-Muslim rioting across this country perpetually since independence. It is not a new phenomenon. If anything, if you go by the national statistics, it has come down very, very significantly.
I'm not going to claim to be an expert like you. I am not one. But I've noticed anecdotally, simply from an anecdotal standpoint, what was often repressed, repelling toward Muslims from Hindus has become far more articulated in private circles, where people will actively mention their disgust.
Yes.
Hindus will mention their disgust for Muslims.
Yes.
Far openly on their mouths as well.
Yes.
That is something we did not have.
Yes. But you will equally find that a lot more Muslims today will equally voice their disgust with Hindus very, very openly. They will call you kufr, they'll say you're wajibul qatl, etc., 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 very, very openly. Okay, so it is not a one-way process, it is a two-way process. Okay, and a lot of it, at least a lot of the public humiliation of Hindus, I don't say humiliation of Hindus, but the name calling of Hindus started off in the 1980s when, Saudi Arabia started exporting its own domestic troubles abroad in the name of jihad. Pakistan and India fell for that crap. So there was a homogenization of a sort of Salafi worldview that happened, and this sort of public cursing and things that went on a high because they wanted to sustain the Afghan jihad. But you look, Saudi Arabia has transitioned beyond. So, Saudi Arabia is kind of like the France of the intellectual world. France, when it had a pedophile problem, it exported all of them to America and claimed that these are the 66 great intellectuals. They're pedophiles who we really don't want. So the internal French conversation, you don't know, wokeism started in Paris.
I know wokeism started in Paris as most movements
All
do.
of those dirty buggers were pedophiles. Foucault was a dirty kiddie fiddler. Sartre was a sick pedophile normalizer.
I've read Sartre in my existentialism class in college.
Yeah, the worst kind of shit I've ever read in my life. And that is why Camus did not want to be associated with these shits. Camus was the one man who had principles. As opposed to say Malraux, Gide and Sartre. Tell me, when did you read Malraux, Gide and Sartre and say, man, this guy makes sense?
No, I never thought Sartre made sense.
Yeah.
I was मेरे को जो बढ़िया लगा था Dostoevsky and Camus, the first and the last.
Yeah. So Dostoevsky and Camus are in a different category. You leave them out.
Yeah.
Okay, because they went, first of all, they went pedophiles. Second of all, they were smart, who wrote very meaningful things.
Yeah.
They connect with you at a certain level. Sartre, Gide and Malraux, if you read them, I'm like, Sartre, let me lift my left bum cheek and fart. Malraux, let me lift my right bum cheek and fart. Gide, let me lift my left bum cheek again and fart. Can you smell the fart? What you smell is what Sartre writes. You know, Beethoven, I think, said this to Schubert or someone. Your symphony is my fart. So Sartre's books are my fart. They were absolute third-rate rotters. Foucault was a disgusting, dirty, perverted piece of shit.
Yeah, they teach him in Ashoka in class.
Now, well, appropriate. Ashoka, Sartre, child molesting all go together.
भगवान अभी ऐसी बातें casually मत बोला कर bro. लोगों को लगेगा कि there's actually truth to this.
But there is.
No, but like.
Okay. But anyway, so what happens is that these 66 dirty little perverts were kicked out of France. They were socially unacceptable in France. They were kicked out. They went to America. And in America, you know, when you're a yuppie who's just come into a lot of money and you're like, man, I want to get a French intellectual to normalize my trust fund as the greatest trust fund on earth. Oh my God, look at that funny little French man out there. He's talking in a French accent that I don't understand, but he's going to make me look posh. You know, it's like how you can get an F-grade piece of shit, a cockney from the worst parts of London, to go to England with an English accent, maybe not with a Cockney accent. Oh, are you doing? No, but oh, how are you? Can I offer you some coffee? And suddenly they think you might not have a single penny in your bank account. But a yuppie little American who's never known money, who suddenly come into billions of dollars, will be like, oh my God, this is an English person coming to me. Well, he's not thinking like that. He's thinking, oh my God, I think this guy was the butler to the Queen, and he can make me like the Queen. I mean, he can't make me the Queen, but he can make me the Duke. And he can make my wife, my trophy wife that I bought from Russia, he can make her look like a queen. This is what they do. They prey on these dumb fuck Americans. यार अमेरिकन चूतिया होते हैं, तेरे को पता है ना? सबके सब चूतिया होते हैं. वो चूतिया कौन है? USA क्या होता है? United States of Asshole. So they got these 66 perverts out, and that was the beginning of the woke revolution out there. It was a slow, because they couldn't be obviously leftist because it is a viciously anti-leftist thing out there. They then indulge their sexual fantasies instead of the political fantasies out there. So Saudi Arabia cultivated all these loonies. They kicked them all out to the Afghan jihad. Jaake maro. It's very smart. We've got a problem here. All these loonies out here. You know what? There's that war going on there. Let me make it a holy jihad. Send them there and they'll all die out.
So Saudi Arabia exported their jihadis into Afghanistan.
What was Osama bin Laden? Osama bin Laden was a domestic malcontent fanatic who the Saudis realized was a fanatic because they knew the only people who are going to go fight in a holy war are fanatics. So they declared it a holy war and pushed the bugger out into Afghanistan, from where he never returned except in a body bag. And he never returned. He was buried in sea.
People often talk about America. I wrote this down in my notes. सब लोग बोलते हैं सबसे ज़्यादा powerful country दुनिया के अंदर अमेरिका है, right? But are we missing the whole picture? Are the Emiratis up to something? And are they actually the most powerful set of countries in the world? Like, when you talk about power, who is actually the most powerful?
The Saudis have always been the most powerful. See, before it used to be Iran. Iran, as long as Iran didn't play up its Shia credentials, which they were very careful to do. You know, Iran and Saudi Arabia were very close friends under the Shah. Because all the Gulf monarchies plus Iran were opposed to Nasser's type of Arab nationalism. They did not want Arab nationalism turning into Muslim nationalism.
This is Egyptian Nasser,
Egyptian Nasser, correct. So there was a long sort of a Cold War which sometimes turned hot between Egypt and all these countries. And then when Nasser goes and Sadat kind of calms down and makes peace and he's not interested in exporting Arab nationalism and destroying monarchies elsewhere, it succeeded. Remember, people forget that it succeeded in Iraq. Iraq used to be a monarchy that got subsumed by Arab nationalism. So all these countries feared it as a very real threat. And it was a real, actual threat. Remember, they tried to seize power from the Jordanian king. It was surprising the Israelis in the 70s, amongst others, who helped the Jordanian king retain his power, which he never forgot, which is why he made peace with them, ultimately. He couldn't do so publicly, but he did in private. Then what happens is that when a new version of political Islam comes in the name of the Iranian Revolution, they get the same thing. You cannot have religious nationalism come and replace monarchies. So they turn on Iran, and conveniently for them, Iran started playing up. That's why they never called it the Shia revolution. They called it the Islamic revolution. Big mistake. Because you're trying to exploit Islamic socialism and Islamic whatever to other countries, not going to tickify, and that's why Iran became the common enemy of the Arab world. And then the Shiism had another aspect to it. Okay. It was good for us because that entire Shia-Sunni split that happened affected our polity today, to this day. The Shia-Sunni split saw to it. Of course, the Shias are very well off in this country, unlike Sunnis.
Even the Americans I met, in the Iranians I met in America, were extremely well off.
Yeah. Iranians are very, yeah, they've been an empire almost continuously for the last 2,500 years. It's not the only time. They stood up against Alexander even before Alexander. They were intimidating Greece. They were the ones that stood against Rome. They were the ones that stood against the second Rome, which was the Ottoman Empire, the Muslim Rome. Because the Ottoman Empire used to call it the Sultanate of Rum.
Right.
Rum, which is Rome. So the Persians have always been opposed to the Romans. And isn't it curious that Rahul Gandhi is partially Persian and partially Roman?
What?
He is, no? Feroz Gandhi was Persian, Parsi, from Persia. His mother is Italian, Roman. He has both the legacy of two great empires and none of the wisdom of either. The classic case of two positives turning out to be a negative. Technically, two positives should be a positive, but anyway, in this case, we know how two positives turn into a negative. But anyway, so these were great empires. These people know. They're very refined and sophisticated when you see the Persians abroad. Even Persians in Persia, when you go there, are extremely sophisticated people. We tend to somehow, I don't know why there is this notion that Iran is some war-torn third world shithole. The average, I have never seen the kind of poverty in Iran that I have in India, boss.
You've been to Iran?
Several times. It's a lovely country. I mean, it gets boring after a while. Like, after 5-6 days out there, I want to get out of it because the food is too dry for me. Like, for all our talk of मैं तरी नहीं खाता हूँ and all of that, ultimately वो तरी चावल का जो ये craze होता है ना, it's too dry. I mean, you need tari and chawal and you need lots of veg. And the only veg they do out there is that salad Shirazi, which is hamara kachumbar.
Damn. Hey, man. Sometimes you stump with all the things you say all at once. So I'm going to refer to my notes.
Yes, okay.
But no, the reason I'm referring to them also is we've just sort of seen the aftermath of a potential coup in Russia, right? And this is something that I'm not sure if you've commented on this on other platforms, but let's talk about how modern people seek out power. We'll use the example of Russia. So I have some rudimentary questions there because I've sort of been ascertaining what is happening from the sidelines, from reading some Twitter, but I don't know the full picture. So what is the Wagner Group? Who is Prigozhin? What did he do that his attempt to power grab Russia from Putin made international headlines? And then what did Putin, an old monarch, do to quash his attempt at gaining power? Further, I read some news that said this was potentially a publicity stunt, a staged coup.
I don't think. I know there's a big constituency that believes this was a staged coup, but no, I think a lot of this saw this coming. But for me, I thought the Ukrainian willpower was going to break first, not Russian willpower. Because we've seen spectacular incompetence in the military command on both the Ukrainian side and on the Russian side. Ukrainian military incompetence is never spoken about because, like we noticed with the Hunter Biden laptop and tapes and everything, the Western Godi media is fantastic at suppressing information. And they promote the same news coming out of, say, Russia, for example. Russian military incompetence is legend. Imagine a superpower being ground down the way it was by Ukraine. Things weren't going well for Putin. Prigozhin had been complaining for almost 6, 7, 8 months about this.
And who is this guy exactly?
So Prigozhin is basically, Russia needed this retirement scheme. Now remember, Russia is a heavily militarized society. Everybody has to do military service. Everybody's trained in guns. Everybody's been given security duties and things. When they come out, you have a heavily militarized population. When you leave the military, you have this sort of militaristic population who all needed to be accommodated. And so they came up with these private military companies, which were quasi-private. I mean, they were private, but they were kind of quasi-state, which would go and fight as mercenaries abroad, but more or less in alignment with Russian foreign policy goals, where Russia didn't want to intervene directly in a conflict, but wanted, like, you know,
They did the dirty work.
1 degree of separation from it.
They did the dirty work.
They did the dirty work. Now they started running. First they thought, I also thought that it would be over in 3-4 days or whatever. Clearly not. Now, the mistakes that we're seeing today at the Russian special forces, especially highly trained special forces, being used as foot soldiers in a pointless meat grinder for no tactical or strategic gain. It saps morale. It destroys morale. And you know, this was the reason you had the mutinies on the Anglo-French mutinies on the trenches of World War II. This is why you had the Russian mutiny, which ultimately resulted in the Bolshevik Revolution in World War One. Anglo-French mutinies in World War One, and the Russian mutinies, which kind of turned into a revolution and everything in World War One as well. But not in World War II, because you had much nastier leaders in World War II across the board. And it was much more mobile warfare. It wasn't kind of that static, well, kind of, again, huge caveats. Here, this had turned into pointless. Everything has been over the same 20, 30, 40 kilometers. It's, I go 10 kilometers ahead, then I go 10 kilometers back. Then I go 10 kilometers ahead, then I go 10 kilometers back kind of thing out here. It was bound to sap morale, boss. You can't, in this modern age, you can't be losing 30, 40,000 men.
Yeah.
To give you context, I think even in our worst war, we've only lost about 7,000-8,000 men at absolute worst. And it's never lasted for more than, say, a month.
This has lasted for almost a year
Over
now.
a year. Well over a year. It's going to be a year and a half.
Okay.
It's going to last for another 3-4 years at least, minimum.
So what is going to happen to the... I mean, let's move away
Anyway,
from...
let's finish what we're talking about.
Sure.
So this was a morale collapse. And Prigozhin wanted to show that you've been making bad decisions. And I'm going to show you that you've been making bad decisions. This is how morale is going to collapse.
And does he have authority to do so? Matlab, wo private military wala insaan hai?
By its very nature, a coup has no authority. No? That's the definition of a coup. So no, he did not have that authority. But it was touch and go. We never knew who was going to succeed ultimately. Remember, Gorbachev was also removed in a coup. But that was probably before you were born.
I've heard of the name.
And it seemed like for the first 12, 13 days that they had succeeded. And then order was restored and the coupsters were removed. There was an attempted coup against Boris Yeltsin. His own vice president and the speaker of his parliament tried to remove him from power, and he sent tanks and shelled the Russian parliament. And this was the great democratic leader, Boris Yeltsin. Boss, you look at the history of the Communist Party of Russia and its successors. You look at the history of the Tsars. Russia has always been a bloody coup pro country, boss. There were coups against Peter the Great.
Catherine the Great.
Against Catherine the Great. She herself killed her own husband in a coup and became this thing.
मैंने कल ही पढ़ रहा था.
Her son could never forgive the fact that he didn't know if he was actually his father's son. He did not. Which is why when he became Tsar, he excluded all women from the line of succession. Before that, Russia had already, in the space of 100 years of Peter the Great, had 3 female Tsars. Well, Tsarinas. After that, it had none, because women were excluded from the line of succession after that, because he considered Tsarina Anna, Tsarina Katerina, Tsarina Katerina II, and Tsarina, who was... I forget the one who came before Anna. She was actually Peter the Great's actual daughter. Anyway, so all of these guys, 4 Tsarinas before...
the son sort of refused it.
Before the son, because for him it played in his mind. And then he himself was removed by his own son, Tsar Alexander, who faced down Napoleon and became the great savior Tsar. So, you know, when Nicholas Romanov, the last Russian Tsar, when they entered World War I, sorry, he came out and read the same pledge to the Russian people that his great-great-great-great-grandfather Tsar Alexander had read out in St. Petersburg when Napoleon invaded Russia, to swear to Holy Mother Russia that he would not rest till the last invader had been kicked out from the sacred soil of Russia, and blah, 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 blah. So, you know, there's this... So, there were so many coups against the Tsars. Lenin survived so many near coups. Stalin survived so many near coups. There were actual plots against him. 90% of the plots were bullshit, but 10% of the plots did happen. Right? His successor then was this presidium of Lavrenti Beria and some people who were removed within months by a coup and executed by a coup.
So this is perfectly in line with tradition.
Yeah, this was led by Khrushchev. Khrushchev himself a few years later was then removed by a coup led by people like Brezhnev, which was then followed by Yuri Andropov and then Gorbachev, who was then removed in a coup, which was followed by Boris Yeltsin, who was almost removed in a coup, which was followed by Putin, which almost got threatened by a coup. This is Russia. This is Russian tradition. Russian tradition is to have coups. It's unnatural for a person to rule long without having coups in Russia. So what's the big deal?
So what happened to this guy? Is he going to get decimated? Prigozhin, is he going to make a pact with another country to survive?
Well, he has. I mean, he's kind of allegedly fled to Belarus, but I think Putin will try to have him killed. And I think that itself will set in motion certain things.
Like?
I think Putin is in a very precarious position right now. I think he's made a big mistake by not sacking people like Shoigu, his defense minister, when he should have. Completely incompetent piece of shit of a defense minister. You know, the only people I have noticed who... Let me give you some context to this. Gerasimov is the general in command of the Ukraine front, and he is Shoigu's blue-eyed boy. Okay? Now, in France, UK, Germany, Israel, America, when a civilian who has not done military anything critiques the military takes it on board, because the military knows that they don't know everything. They might not know systems management, they might not know economics, they might not know this, they might not know that. So they always get all of that on board. India and Russia are the only 2 countries I know where if you are not a military person, their standard defense against some bullshit they've done is, तूने क्या बंदूक चलाया है? तूने क्या फ्रंट पे आके पाकिस्तानियों को फेस किया है? तूने प्लेन चलाया है? तूने सबमरीन चलाया है? This is the classic deflection of the weak, lazy, corrupt mind. It only happens in India and Russia, that, as far as I know. Happens in Pakistan and other tin pot little dictatorships as well. That's a different matter. Now, they actually got the best defense minister Russia had was before this guy called Shoigu. He was a guy called Serdukov. Now, Serdukov, what he did was he was very, very smart, because he was a furniture salesman. But he was very smart because he decided, boss, the Russian military can't be doing shit like procurement, this, that. How is it we spend so much on defense and 90% of our equipment is obsolete and unusable? Right? We haven't modernized in so many days. So he rearranged the finances and he told the military guys, you leave everything else to domain experts. You just focus on tactics and fighting wars. You can't get into all this bullshit. And their standard comeback to him is, tu kya janta hai, you're a bloody furniture salesman. Unfortunately for the furniture salesman, he got caught with his penis in somebody else's wife. And so on moral grounds, he was sacked. Now, this was seen as a great validation of the military guys who were saying, ye to furniture salesman hai.
Ignorance reigns supreme.
And so you had a complete dumb jackass called Shoigu who was made this thing. What did Shoigu do? He had to tick all the boxes of all the old thinking generals who wanted no change in the system. Which is why even now in the battle, almost all the Russian systems being used are obsolete. The modernization that Serdukov wanted never happened. You go check Shoigu's kids' income, it will be insane. But this is what happens. And it's gone back to the lessons of Chechnya 1 and Chechnya 2, which is huge Russian casualties for no real returns. We thought things were changing after the Georgia campaign, even though there were warnings. You know, when Russia invaded Georgia, it was a fairly successful and fairly quick campaign by Russian standards. We thought things were improving. But clearly, some Russian generals thought, we've reached the mean and now we can go back to corruption. And they went back to corruption and laziness. This is not to say they're not brave. They're very brave generals. They're leading from the front. But boss, that's not enough.
Is Russia crumbling now?
I don't think Russia is crumbling. Look, you have to fear a Russia crumbling because every time Russia crumbles, it comes back much more powerful. You know, so when you look at the Russian principalities that is the first Russian identity we know, which was Slavs who got conquered by the Vikings and created the modern Russian identity around Kiev, surprisingly. The mother of Russia is actually in Kiev, in Ukraine. It was crushed by the Mongols. And that is when the power shifts to the north to Novgorod and Moscow. And this new Russia comes back much more powerful. It lasts for 300-400 years till it falls to internal decay. And it breaks up and the Poles invade. They install a puppet emperor who's removed very rapidly. And within 40-50 years, they come back even more powerful than that under the Romanov dynasty. Right? And they go and conquer Poland. Then what happens is they just start going everywhere. They first crumble under the Crimean War and things like that. There are several defeats from which they come back stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. They become the biggest country on earth. They crushed in the Crimean War, but they held out. Germany did not realistically defeat Russia in the First World War. The Russian government, the new government under the Bolsheviks, signed. Victory was 6 months away. Britain and France told them, hold out for the next 6 months, we'll get a crushing victory. But the Bolsheviks wanted to crush internal enemies first, and so they sold out Russia and gave up most of its European holdings because they wanted to deal with internal Russian enemies first. Okay. Communists are traitors. They generally are, till they're in power. And then they become super nationalistic, by the way. So, then you have the USSR that is created.
Right.
Which becomes even bigger. Which after the German attempt to crush it becomes its biggest ever because it gobbles up half of Europe, which is called Eastern Europe or the Soviet bloc or whatever.
Eastern bloc.
The Eastern bloc. And it becomes a global empire because it spreads communist revolution everywhere. China, this, that, for about 10 years. Yeah. China and Russia were extremely in sync and everything. No? And then, it collapses again. And I think this is still that 30, 40 years of troubles that Russia always goes through after every single collapse. Maybe even a 100-year period of trouble like happened after the Mongol invasion. But you should always fear a Russia that collapses because it always comes back much bigger and nastier than it ever was.
That's not the case for America though, right?
America's a new country, no? We don't know how it'll come back. But, I wouldn't say America is a completely new country. I think it's a historical handover of the Roman Empire. This notion of a Roman Empire, which is a hyperpower, realistically, I won't say the Roman Empire ever died, because it went from being the Roman Empire to the split Roman Empire, the Eastern and the Western Roman Empire, which after the destruction of the Western Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire starts getting called Byzantium, which is technically they never called themselves Byzantium. They called themselves Basileon Romeon. Basil is the name for emperor, so Basileon. The Romeon it's Greek for Roman Empire.
Okay.
Then when the Ottomans took it over, they called themselves the Sultanate of Rome.
Correct.
So that was again the Roman Empire. But then because the Byzantine emperor's daughter married the Russian Tsar, the Tsar believed that he had taken over the Roman Empire, and that is why Moscow is called the Third Rome. There was the First Rome, there was the Second Rome, which was Constantinople, and Moscow referred to itself as the Third Rome. But there is also an intellectual tradition that believes that Rome was an idea of a Western, hegemonistic, norm-laying hyperpower, which was the Western Roman Empire, which became the Eastern Roman Empire, which then became the Holy Roman Empire possibly, but mostly became the British Empire, which then became the American Empire.
That's crazy. So you really believe that this ancient idea has traveled all the way across to America?
I think the ancient notion and the belief of the civilizing influence and force for good that has ruled through a kind of what Antonio Gramsci calls Gramsci's definition of a hegemonistic power in the Roman mold is for the greater common good. Whether it is or not is a different matter, but for the greater common good, the self-impression of being for the greater common good is very much alive in America today.
And Russia does not have a positive good at the center, right?
You even look at the emblem. The emblem of the Roman Empire was the eagle, which was always carried by the Roman standards with the SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome. Of course, in asterisks and obliques, they make fun of it and say sono questi pazzi romani, which is these Romans are crazy, which is why asterisks always taps his head and says these Romans are crazy. Asterisks and obliques, they always say SPQR, SPQR.
The cartoon.
Yeah. So people, it's kind of lost on people, but that's meant to be a pun on SPQR. The eagle became the emblem of the Byzantine Empire. It became the emblem of the Russian Empire as the double-headed eagle because it looks both east and west. And what is the emblem of the American state?
An eagle.
Correct.
Wow. I just always thought it's because the American eagle is native to the continent. Okay, I want to speak about Napoleon because he's someone who's often brought up as sort of a commander known for Napoleonic tactics, brilliant military strategy, and a very huge ego. How is it that his legacy has been so eternal that even now he's quoted so often? Was he truly a great military commander? Do modern armies and leaders truly use his tactics to succeed in times of war and peace?
Not really.
No?
He had become obsolete even in his own lifetime. So, for example, in the early part of his career, and this is what happens when you rule for too long, you start losing touch. Unless you're, say, somebody extraordinary like Lee Kuan Yew, who did not lose touch and knew when to quit and hand over to a successor who had not lost touch. Many people don't know that they're overstaying their welcome. And Napoleon was one such character. Now, his issue was he had a messiah complex, probably justifiably so, but he was so desperate to become emperor, right? So there's a very famous story about Napoleon and Beethoven. Beethoven and a lot of Europe looked at him as this new republican messiah against corrupt monarchies.
Such as the UK.
The UK, mostly for the German states, it was the little German states and the Austro-Hungarian Empire and things like that. And their thing was, they wanted this kind of republican idea coming. Okay? But because of their own reality. Remember, the UK was still a lot more liberal at this time than, say, some of the German states. The German states, people don't talk about it during this period, but they were nasty as hell. The kings of the German states and the dukes and the earls and whatever of the German states, some of them were really nasty because they were fractured. Power had been institutionalized like it had in the UK at this point of time. So UK was still, you still had much more in terms of civil liberties and rights in UK at Napoleon's time than you did in a lot of the German states. Even Austria-Hungary was relatively more liberal than a lot of the German states were. Some of the German states would make North Korea look free by comparison.
Were they persecuting people? Were they like just...
Not persecuting, but all-round political control, thought suppression, etc., etc., etc.
Right.
And Germany at this time was shit poor. German quality in those days was considered... Today, Germany is synonymous with quality. That was a very conscious decision by Bismarck that we were going to become a quality-conscious country. Germany in those days was renowned for bad quality. The notion of German quality is like Pakistani quality today. Would you make a buy in Pakistan mobile phone?
No.
In those days, nobody would touch a made in Germany anything. Not even German steel. Okay, so that was the belief in quality. So Beethoven wrote his third symphony. Some consider it the best symphony he ever wrote. I think it's shit, but anyway, Eroica, for Napoleon. And the moment he heard that Napoleon had declared himself emperor, he crossed out the entire dedication to Napoleon. So, there was a whole reason why the Republican armies of France, because they broke thinking. They had executed the entire officer corps because the officer corps was all nobility. An ordinary person could not become an officer.
Right.
Only nobility could become officers. They had new ideas about tactics because they were the ones dying. So these officers knew how to prevent dying and things like that.
They had skin in the game.
Suddenly, exactly. They suddenly get promoted to officers. And they were beating every dogma around them because every general around them was a bloody nobility officer. They were beating the dogma. The moment Napoleon becomes emperor, he starts thinking of himself as nobility because now he feels he's equal to all the emperors.
He's a peasant who's become emperor. Can we say that?
And now he starts engaging in nepotism. He starts believing that birth determines the quality of an officer.
And yet he's risen
using... He himself, imagine a nobody, a peasant who has become emperor, starts getting these delusions of nobility by birth and shit like that. And so all his generals kind of become these nobility type people who are slowly but surely losing touch. Now he's so successful in the battlefield that everybody around him, the Brits, the Russians, the Austrians, the Spanish, they are forced to innovate. So even though they still have nobles as generals, the one good thing they do is they're realizing we're losing war after war after war. How do we innovate? So at the same time that Napoleon is ossifying, all the innovation of Napoleon happened in the Republican era of France. Napoleon's emperorship stymied all the innovation with military thinking that happened in France. At the same time, it gave completely new thoughts of warfare here in UK plus Spain. Because remember, the Spanish Civil War was ultimately won by the Duke of Wellington, who served in India as well, but ultimately won at Waterloo. The whole idea of guerrilla, that is, it is from that particular war, the Spanish Civil War, that the word guerrilla warfare comes. The small war. Guerra is war. Guerrilla it's a diminutive. It's a small war. Okay? And at the same time in Russia, this concept of strategic depth, where you keep dragging the enemy in and let winter kill them, starts emerging. So they are finding ways of using Napoleon's tactics against him. And he doesn't even realize that tactics have moved on, to the point that his last battle at Waterloo is an absolute disaster, because he's even forgotten how artillery is used. He's literally sending 80 men shoulder to shoulder directly into a cannon volley. What the hell were you thinking? He doesn't realize that, a cavalry charge isn't going to work against the squares that Wellington comes up with. So, what a square is it's people just forming up with their bayonets and guns.
On all four sides.
On all four sides.
Yeah.
And cavalry can keep charging, but you're not going to win up against a volley of musket fire.
Yeah, it's a very old Greek tactic. I actually read it in an essay.
Well, it's a variation of an even older. The earliest we know of this tactic is about 2000 BC.
Okay.
I think the first we know of a kind of a shield wall with spikes coming out is from Sumer, of the king of Lagash leading his, what we think is the king of Lagash leading his army, but it's much older than the Greeks. Basically, the thing is, if your infantry is disciplined, no horse charge can penetrate it, because a horse is fundamentally a flight animal.
Right.
And with guns, that entire equation changes even more. This guy was obsolete by the end of his career.
So why is it that all treatises written on military strategy, and even Robert Greene has lauded him in more than 3 or 4 books talking about the grand, like how he could be dynamic at the right time, how he was very well prepared, and then he could still be dynamic in war, and he was, he's been lauded in more books than probably any other general.
I think in pop history, yes, but not in serious military history.
No?
I think every serious military historian realizes he had a graph that rose like this, and then it plateaued out, and then zoom. The crash was very steep. So, the Russians had actually defeated Napoleon even before winter set in. That is what people don't realize. Winter made the scale of Napoleon's defeat much greater. It was the same with the German offensive. The German offensive was stopped at Moscow. It stalled. And then winter made that defeat much greater. Okay. So remember what happens even with the current Ukrainian offensive, or the counteroffensive, or whatever you want to call it. You remember last September, the Ukrainians had a very successful counteroffensive that pushed the Russians back 70, 80 kilometers. We spoke about this. What happened? It stalled just before winter. The Ukrainians wasted all their thing in winter, but the line stalled in winter, and they haven't moved since that winter. If anything, only in Russia's favor. Okay. That is why I said, even after the stalling of the German campaign, it took, 2, 3, 4 years before the Russians went back on the offensive. So Russia will still take another 2, 3, 4 years to achieve its goals in Ukraine. But this whole thing about Napoleon, it's a very pop history view. There's much more nuanced views of Napoleon which have existed for a very long time. It's nothing new. It's not that it's new historiography or anything. That he started off as a fantastic general, as long as it was Republican France. The decline sets in the moment, not the moment, but close to when he becomes emperor. That is when ossification sets in, and then finally catastrophic collapse.
Broadly, can we say that soldiers make bad emperors?
Not necessarily, but any leader who lasts for too long outlives their utility.
Are we seeing that with Putin now?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, we are seeing that with Putin. You're seeing that with Putin because this is, I think, Ukraine's the classic case of it. I can't believe the level of incompetence he's put up with in terms of Shoigu and Gerasimov.
What about Modi? Have we outlived him yet, or is he just as nascent?
I think 15 years is a good time. I think post 15 years is when the diminishing return sets in. It's a classic case. I mean, it's human nature, no? Like, you know what diminishing returns is, the law of diminishing returns. When you're thirsty, that first gulp of water is like heaven. The next 10 gulps are great. But then the 11th gulp is like, or the 12th gulp really,
Yeah.
is like,
Eventually you will puke.
eventually you'll puke.
There's a new gentleman now that's taking the airwaves in America, Mr. Kennedy. Joseph Kennedy, I think. He's fit. He's sort of, well, Eric Weinstein said on Twitter that he's the disclose everything to the public kind of president, right? And show देखो आपके साथ ये बुरा हो रहा है, ये बुरा हो रहा है, ये बुरा हो रहा है. Then there is Trump, who I love as a businessman, love as a PR marketing guru. He's also trying to win. He's also trying to contest. Then there is Biden. What do you think is going to happen? Is America moving more toward the left?
I don't think Trump can come back again, because I'll tell you why. Trump won when everybody discounted him. They're not going to make that mistake again. They're going to go out of their way to see to it. You know, the first statement Biden made when he won was something inconceivable in democracy that nobody should say. It violated every single principle of a democracy.
In his first speech.
Yeah. Which is to say, I will see to it that nobody like Trump ever becomes president again. And he set up committees. Now, technically, as per the rule of law, if you find illegality, it's fine. But you can't target somebody, go after them to search for illegality.
Right.
That is considered the Stasi, KGB kind of method. That is exactly what they've done with Trump. They want to get him for something, so they're actually aiming for charges which are completely untenable. Okay. So they've done all kinds of unconstitutionality going after him, but they are not going to underestimate him a second time round. Okay. This is number one. Robert Kennedy, Eric Weinstein's a friend, but I don't think...
Wait, sorry. I should say that. Robert Kennedy. I said Joseph Kennedy. I apologize.
Yeah. Robert Kennedy gets it wrong frequently, which is totally fine, but I don't think Robert Kennedy will find any traction.
Why is that? Is the Kennedy name not enough?
I think the Kennedy name might actually be anathema, because especially they would have expected him to be expounding Democrat dogma, which he's not. So he's kind of like Tulsi Gabbard, the wrong name in the wrong party, or the wrong name, or the right name with the wrong ideology. I don't know which permutation.
Yeah, मेरे को तो तुलसी बहुत बढ़िया लगती थी.
हाँ, but she had all the right ideas in the wrong party.
Yeah, she would be a great conservative.
Exactly. She would be a fantastic conservative, but she was a Democrat.
Yeah.
In the Democrat, you need to be a loony suicide bomber like Ilhan Omar, or a prospective suicide bomber. Mark my words, Ilhan Omar will blow herself up one day, and it will be a suicide vest, and it will be Semtex. But with this, either proverbially or metaphorically or actually physically, I don't know, but Ilhan Omar will be the cause of Ilhan Omar's downfall. But Robert, wrong name with the right ideas, or the right name with the wrong ideas? You take your pick. I don't know which one. Traction nahi milega, boss. One great candidate who talks sense is Vivek Ramaswamy.
Who's that?
He's this Indian conservative, fantastic guy. Makes sense on everything. Unlike Robert Kennedy, who gets it horribly wrong on
America
certain things.
बनने देगा Indian president.
नहीं बनेगा. Especially a Hindu who's proud to be a Hindu. कभी नहीं
UK में तो बना लिया.
Who hasn't converted to Christianity. And remember, in India, you don't have to convert to Hinduism to become prime minister. In America, you have to convert to Christianity, and you have to be very public about it. Nikki Haley has to be public about it. Piyush Jindal has to be public about it.
Yeah, you said the last time that
Obama has to be very public about his belief in God, faith, church, and all that bullshit. I bet you he would not hesitate to violate every single tenet of the Bible, but publicly ये ढोंग करना पड़ता है उसे. ये सब ढोंगी होते हैं, समझ रहे हो ना? But here, Vivek cannot. There's one more Indian guy running, I think, who cannot. It's going to be Biden again. I think it's going to be a replay of Biden versus Trump, and I think Biden's going to win again. But what's very interesting right now is it seems to me that the Obamas, Michelle and Barack, they're organizing some kind of a palace coup against Biden.
Really?
I'm getting that sense. All my creepers on the vine in DC are telling me that they're planning a coup against him, because they've they've realized that they can be polarizing and not worry because the Democrats will be focused on defeating Trump. They needed Biden because he had the least negatives, but this time if Michelle Obama stands, there will be lots of negatives against her, but they won't worry. So Biden was the insurance policy, and now that they're feeling secure, they're happy to play their hand.
Michelle को कौन बनाएगा?
Why not? Haven't you seen Javed Akhtar? He keeps tweeting every year saying, Michelle Obama, you don't know me. I'm a famous music composer from India. Ask any of your Indian associates. They'll tell you about me. The only person to save America is you. You must contest for president. Have you not seen? Arey bhai, Twitter search kar le, put at the rate of Javed Akhtar and at the rate of Michelle Obama.
I hate when Indians do stuff like that. जैसे जब दिलजीत ने करा था to Kylie Jenner मानती नहीं है do comments में. It's a
So it's yeah. But look, I think ultimately what is that white-haired lady in Game of Thrones called? The Bewdy Queen Mother.
कौन? बेवड़ी कौन? वो Cersei?
हाँ, Cersei Lannister. हाँ.
एक दो आइन
Power is power.
हाँ.
Anybody who says power is something else doesn't know about it. And only who really know power know about it. Now, we are two losers sitting and talking about power.
No.
I mean, don't take this. I've never taken myself terribly seriously, but anyway.
Of course, but the
This
reason
is really intellectual fulminations on what we think power might be.
The reason I wanted to use power as a context for our conversation today is because it seems to me that people talk about everything else except the thing that people are going directly for. All of these people, we're talking about them because they went for these top offices, right? If they just said, no, I'm here to make some impact, or I want to be a better dad, we wouldn't have had these people.
You tell me, has Modi ever said, I want to be Prime Minister?
No, he has not.
No, he's never ever said that.
I don't think he's ever used the word PM.
Yeah, he's only said, Achhe din, Desh Seva, corruption mukt Bharat, Congress mukt Bharat. He has never ever said main Pradhan Mantri. Remember Augustus, the most important principle of power. If you want it, deny it. Okay. The problem with Rahul Gandhi is everybody says Agla Pradhan Mantri, which is why he's not going to get it.
He can't stealthily rise to the top.
He can't.
Yeah.
Okay. Mukesh Ambani, has he ever said, I want to be the richest man, I want to be India's most powerful? Has he ever said that? No, and yet he is.
Okay then. This is power.
This is power. I think it was best described by Margaret Thatcher. And this is why I love Margaret Thatcher. I think I most closely identify with being a Thatcherite. Power is like, I'm paraphrasing, power is like being a woman. If you have to say you are, you aren't.
I'm reminded of something that Oscar Wilde wrote. Do not have contempt for society, Algernon. It is only those who can't get into it have that.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah. Or what Groucho Marx said, I don't want to be a member of a club that will have me as its member.
But I think, yeah. There's one small passage I want to bring up and then we will wrap this conversation. I was reading The Prince by Machiavelli again, and it was said of the Medicis that whenever they felt like their rule was getting dismissed and people were considering them soft, they would swiftly enact a massive act of terror just to remind them of the fears that their ancestors faced. And they would do it swiftly and painlessly, but they would strike terrors in their hearts again. I also see जैसे भी देश के अंदर थोड़ा relaxation होती है, Modi just introduces something that sort of, puts people in tension again.
Not in tension again. Not in tension. I think it's very different. There's a difference between Machiavelli's terror and
maybe that's a bad analogy.
Modi's pulling a rabbit out of the hat.
That's more like that, yeah.
remember, the Medicis only lasted for what, 3 generations? There was Lorenzo di Medici, Cosimo di Medici, and the last Medici, after which Medici power waned.
Yeah.
It didn't disappear immediately, but the Medici power only lasted 3. Maurya imperial power only lasted 3. Chandragupta, Samudragupta, and Ashoka. And Ashoka began the collapse. The collapse of the Mauryan Empire started under number 3 himself. What we call the Roman Empire was actually several different dynasties all operating together. So, in rapid succession. So, इसमें ना ये बहुत the Gandhi dynasty is Nehru, Indira, Rajiv, and then
no more.
That's it. The decline started under number 4. Well, the decline technically after Rajiv. They never really came back to power by themselves. No, the decline started under number 3 itself. You see this across every Indian empire. This has happened, almost without exception. They were destroyed by the Mughals, for example. Were destroyed. Humayun कौन सा emperor था? उसको तो भागना पड़ा. He spent most of his life in exile. No, Babur came in exile. His son was kicked out back into exile. Then he came back and hardly ruled. But it was Akbar, then Jahangir, then Shah Jahan. By Aurangzeb, everybody claims Aurangzeb expanded the empire, but it was expanding and collapsing both at the same time. 3-4 maximum में collapse शुरू हो जाता है.
Inevitably across the world.
Inevitably, mostly across geographies. Mostly, not always, but there are notable exceptions to it. Let me give you a simple example. Everybody talks about Russia. Okay? Russia, after about 4-5 czars, it had started wavering. It required a full infusion of the house of Gottrop. Catherine she didn't have a shred of Russian blood in her.
Yes, she was a foreign princess.
She was a German.
Yeah.
And every one of her subsequent rulers who issued forth from her married foreign. There wasn't a single drop of Russian blood in Tsar Nicholas Romanov. Lenin wasn't technically a Russian. He was a Chuvash, which is an Eskimo tribe. Stalin wasn't a Russian. He was a fucking Georgian. Okay. Khrushchev wasn't a Russian. Lavrenti Beria, who preceded for that short 2-month period, Lavrenti Beria was a Georgian. He was a Mingrelian, just like Stalin. Khrushchev was a bloody Ukrainian. He wasn't even Russian. Putin Russian hai. So, you could literally say that Brezhnev was the first Russian to rule Russia in almost 300 years. Surprise, isn't it? So, identity is very complicated.
And so is power. And on that note, Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, my friend, thank you for your extended displays of wit on all things that you talk about. I am perpetually at a loss of words when I'm speaking with you on these topics. But that is the nature of knowledge. You seem to have all of the answers to these things.
I'm still a student and I will learn till my last breath.
I think that is
everything. I believe everything I said till 6 months back was wrong because every 6 months I keep changing my views.
People came to our last podcast and they said, "Ye to galat nikla," with some of your predictions, because people do tend to hold predictions in too high a regard, which makes no sense. Anyway, people.
But last time, kya galat nikla?
Arey yaar ki, I think something people could not. Like you were saying कि Putin खराब कर देगा सब कुछ, but then the war sort of went on for a long time and then people just came back in the comments.
But I've not changed the fact that Putin is still going to win. There is no way Russia cannot win this war.
It's just going to take a long time to win.
It's a question of how long. Because see, the thing that the coup did was it has now made it existential for Russia. अगर हम ये war ना जीते, we are going to face a kind of civil war like what followed the collapse in the First World War. They're not going to allow that. Especially Putin. For Putin's personally, he now sees this as an existential crisis. He knows if he does not win this war, he will probably be executed and nasty things will happen to him. Russia is very unforgiving with leaders who lose wars. They usually end up dead, killed by their own people. This is what happened with Catherine's husband, who kind of gave a victory away to Frederick the Great. This is what happens with Tsar Nicholas, who ended up with his bones dissolved in acid at the bottom of a coal shaft somewhere in Siberia. So, you know, this...
Thank God we live in India, man.
Yeah. Thank God. Or, I mean, I think we're a bit too forgiving of failure in this country, unlike the Russians. But I still believe Russia will win the war on balance. So let's break that prediction down. Why? Because there are two things that we're seeing. Sure, Russian weapons are crap. But Ukraine is using quality weapons at quantity rates that they were not meant to be used at. So there's fundamentally going to be a greater logistics supply problem out there. Okay? At some point, Ukrainian morale will have to collapse because the iron fist out there isn't as nasty as the iron fist in Russia. And after this coup especially, the iron fist just became a lot nastier in Russia. Third is just the sheer amount of people that you can throw into a conflict and the will to sustain it even when your national morale breaks. In Russia, there's no question of national morale breaking when you control the news so tightly. Ukraine, much greater chance of that. So, the timelines may or may not fructify, but the overall thing of what I said, I maintain Russia is still going to win this. And in India, of course, it will be seen as a validation of Russian weaponry in the Indian military, which it is not. It will be seen, I don't know, as a proof of Russian weakness or the ability to defeat Russia, even though, I mean, NATO did not lose. It was the Ukrainians who lost. The West will fight to the last Ukrainian man, woman and child, but they won't ever commit a single troop of their own. Important lesson for India if you want to become a West ka Katputla. But I haven't changed anything. The timelines may change. Remember, Europe also got saved this time by an unusually warm winter. Had this been a nasty winter, you would have seen a very different Europe. So remember, climate helps. You never know what a milder winter might have done to Napoleon. Maybe Napoleon would have turned the tide. What a milder winter might have done for Hitler. Maybe Hitler would have turned the tide.
I never thought that weather is such an influential
Weather
thing.
is everything. Human migrations have been determined by weather. The whole reason the Mongol invasions took place was climate change. The whole reason the Turkic...
When it became too hot in the desert, that's why they invaded other countries?
No, you have certain significant climate impacts that happen, which force migrations, which force certain kinds of aggressive behavior. These are all Tungushik people who come from a very, very cold channel that funnels Arctic wind into Russia, into the eastern steppes. So a lot of the belief is that the same reason the Huns migrated to the western India, the same reason the Turks migrated to the western India, the same reason the Mongols migrated to the western India, all has to do with climate change. Syrian civil war, we can actually catalogue it, that it was climate change that started it. You know, Syria, see, there's always been three power centers out there: Damascus, Aleppo and Baghdad. Okay? Because of modern, and these three have always been in competition with each other. Baghdad got severed because of modern boundaries and the notion of a modern state. But Aleppo and Damascus have always been within Syria. Now, Aleppo is where all the agriculture and things like that used to happen. And the drought, the multi-year drought that started off in about 2007, ultimately metastasized to the fact even when you could see the kind of migration that was happening from north to south. You could see the impoverishment of the north happening. It's all very easy to see now, but we saw it happening, but nobody actually predicted it. I think there was only one person who saw that particular trend. I've forgotten his name. Brilliant guy. And who combined it. I think it was the Stimson Center. This guy who combined the drought with the demographic youth bulge that had happened in Syria at that time and said, boss, this is like a ticking time bomb. And he was right, that the root of 2011, the beginning of the Syrian war, was laid in 2007 when the mass migrations from the north, from the Aleppo region, started happening to Damascus, creating a huge population imbalance, creating unrest, which ultimately blew up with excess population of youth to whatever Karofai. The Syrian civil war is one of the clearest examples. It's always blamed on demography, but it was demography plus climate change.
That's insane.
Most of human history has been written by climate change.
One doesn't even factor these things in. One often wonders about military mights and military rankings and arms races and all of these things.
See, why do you... Okay, before the industrial age, all wealth was based on agricultural power, right? And to an extent on gold and diamond or whatever resources.
Natural resources. There was no clear productivity.
But mostly, even if you had mines, you did not have population, and wealth was based on population and the ability to agriculturally maximize productivity. Which is why, and that too, it had to be done in certain semi-arid areas, because it's in semi-arid areas where productivity is the highest. Okay? So what ends up happening is this is why Egypt, Babylon, Harappa, which are today like semi-aridish areas or totally arid areas, but in those days were kind of semi-aridish areas, were the cradles of civilization. Or in Peru, which is a deserted area today, which rose around the same time, about 2000 BC-ish. How is it that some countries then, given that all agricultural productivity is the same, how do some countries become more powerful than other countries? Ceteris paribus के principle पे काम नहीं करता है ना फिर, तो कुछ तो हुआ होगा.
What is ceteris paribus?
Those are the two rules of economics, that man is rational, and ceteris paribus, which is all other variables staying the same.
Okay.
How do you explain that some countries became more powerful? So why was it that most of your old empires rose in Bihar? Why did the Guptas, the Mauryas, Magadha, Nanda all come from Bihar?
Why?
I don't know. I don't know yet. But remember, it's one of the most productive areas around there, but clearly it was something else that was happening out there which we don't know about. Because the entire Ganga Jamuna Doab is a fertile area. So technically it should have risen even in somewhere around Agra or something like that. Kyun nahi hua? Why does it happen only in Bihar? And why does it happen from Bihar repeatedly? Why is it that in Italy you have not just the Roman Empire, but then the Renaissance also coming out of there?
Uska weather to bahut acha hai. Can we say that promotes kind of, I mean, we're just out of our depth when we say those things, but India can generally weather, like Delhi is a very torrid climate, right? It's not really like a place for great literary, artistic expansion, but people love Mediterranean weather, and wahan log bahut maze karte rehte hain. They have vacations all the time. Maybe.
But the major climate change events is what brings up the disruption. Be it the repeated tribal invasions from Siberia, so Huns to begin with, and then Turks, and then Mongols, who are all probably related to each other in one way or another. The great catastrophes in Central and South America, the collapse of the Moche, the collapse of the Maya, which were all kind of climate change related. Climate change has played a disproportionate role in history. Egypt is a Bronze Age country. There is in spite of Egypt maintaining production levels into the Iron Age and the modern era, Egyptian power is purely a Bronze Age phenomenon. After the Bronze Age collapse in 1177, there is no great Egyptian empire ever after that. It's perpetually colonized by somebody from outside.
Right.
Why? We don't know. I mean, we know that this happens, but we still don't know the causal reasons of why that happens.
Well, I'm going to listen to this podcast again and again because I think we've covered more events in history and in contemporary events than we ever have in any of our conversations. So thank you for taking the time to do this podcast with me, and I value your expertise and your friendship. This was probably the most tame Dostcast, yet the most knowledgeable Dostcast with Abhijit Iyer-Mitra that I've had the pleasure to host. And obviously you can follow him on Ayerwal on Twitter. You know, you're actually shadow banned on Twitter.
Yeah, I know.
I tried searching your name today.
Apparently so. So I've taken it to the tribunal, to the
I know
IT
that.
tribunal, yeah.
So Ayerwal on Twitter, and if you search YouTube pe Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, the name like always pops up as I think one of the 5 or 6 horsemen of the new Indian right.
Or the horseman of the of the coming Indian apocalypse. Perpetual pessimist.
ठीक है, okay, bye bye. This was fun, man. Thank you.
Jai Ram ji ki beta.